I feel like with the introduction of ChatGPT 3 a year ago, the tech space is starting to feel a bit more interesting again. A year ago, I found it. I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. Why is everyone not using this? And then I realized like, oh, it just needs a little time to kind of get adopted. So with that, what did you find out? Like what stories did you manage to dig up?
Yeah, I think I found a few interesting people here. I found an interesting story about a guy, Thomas Ricard. I'm not pronouncing that right, I'm sure. He's a web developer. He's been working on this new app, Ice Cubes. He
Okay.
called it. It's a Mastodon chat client. And, you're rolling out an app. One of the things that's so easy to overlook in the design setup is you need an icon. You need something to stand out, that logo. And for a developer, design skills are often not necessarily at the forefront of a lot of their wheelhouse. So, why not try one of these new AI devices? And he was playing around with Midjourney, who is one of the big ones out there. They're only available through their Discord. Just go in, you type imagine whatever in natural language, and it spits out whatever you want, really.
Sure.
But one of the things he found pretty quickly was that it needs a fair bit of input. So he had this idea that each, ice cube in his Ice Cubes app is kind of a floating universe of its own in a shared common glass. So he types in the prompt, 4 ice cubes in a glass of water. The glass is floating in deep space. And he gets back some stuff like this, which is exactly what he put in. It looks really good. And for just a few words in all of 30 seconds, that's really good. It doesn't really look a lot like an app. So he's like, okay, that's not great. Puts in just another prompt. He got this.
Boom. This is fantastic. I didn't realize that this was just 2 steps in. That's it.
Two steps, 2 sentences. Anyone can do this in 5 minutes.
And he actually used this, like, as in there is a app out there in the iOS store that has one of these 4 images, or there was further refinement?
So this was actually further refined. I did manage to find this guy's Twitter, and I've since lost where I had that Ice Cubes. But the final result was something very similar, and we can see the final app icon here, which honestly I like a little bit less. I liked the clean simplicity of the other one, but this is also very much inspired by, if not directly taken from, those prompts.
Yeah, it'd be cool to find out. I'm assuming the information wasn't there. Maybe we can find it out. We can figure it out in the future, or maybe we get in touch with him and figure out if, like, I find like with a lot of generative content writers, it'll help you get a first draft, second draft, third draft, but I still do need to go in there and put the final touch on it. It would be interesting to find out if he got 100% of the way there, or if it was the same process where I got him like 80%, but then he kind of got it into Photoshop or whatever and cleaned it up because it looked a little cleaner in the, just the kind of the straight edges and he probably gave that to a designer. But still, I'm really impressed. I've only used DALL-E, the open AI one, not Midjourney. I didn't realize it was that good. I've only been playing around with DALL-E, so I didn't. 2 prompts to get that's pretty cool. That's fantastic.
From there, but no, you're exactly right. There's actually a really good one that came up later on about a guy who was trying to use ChatGPT to create a basic to-do app, and everything was working pretty fine until apparently ChatGPT at one point was trying to, what do I have here? Yeah, he was trying to update the wrong version of Firebase. It had the most updated 7.0 is the most updated version when it's actually 9.0. So this guy that I'm talking about, his name's Fernando Doglio. He's a freelance tech journalist. And like I mentioned, he wanted to see if ChatGPT can be used to create an app. I'm not a great coder. I've played around with this for like snippets, and okay, yeah, you look at basic stuff, you put in, give me he put in Give me the code to create a to-do app that allows me to edit the items and store them in a database. Use React for the front end and Next.js for the back end. Very simple language, the kind of task you would be able to give to any really entry-level developer and get something that functions, by the end of the day. So pretty straightforward. And sure enough, he gets a bunch of code that it's a to-do app.
Wow.
Kind of.
Okay.
He specifically asked it to use base storage. It was using in-memory, and the items were not editable, which is kind of a big thing.
That's a big
So but he got a really good framework of it.
Sure.
And with just he put in another prompt afterwards asking, modify the code to add support for a cloud database, being intentionally vague. Again, the kind of language you would be able to give to an actual person. They would know based on the previous conversation exactly what you wanted. And again, it worked kind of. It came out with a lot of detail, but when he was putting it actually together, it was missing a few obvious things. There was no way to actually import data. Minor thing, quickly fixed. We've all done that. And as I mentioned, it was kept spitting out an error saying that it was using the wrong version of this plugin.
Sure.
And he's like, no, that's absolutely the most updated one. So he asked the bot finally, what version of Firebase NPM should I use for this? And it comes out saying exactly, these modules are part of Firebase 7.x, which is the latest release as of this writing.
Oh, because it's trained up until 2019.
And they're up to version 9.0 at this point. But once he got these projects done, once he got that solved, it worked. It actually did come up with an editable, to-do list that did everything he wanted it to do with a handful of prompts and some basic troubleshooting. It took, less than an hour.
So this was clearly an experiment because he was like giving something intentionally vague and saying, okay, how much architectural thinking can you do? And I think that's pushing the limits of what it can do. And I know that a lot of programmers use it on a much more modular basis, which is like, okay, I'm going to take responsibility for the architecture. I'm going to think about how all the pieces fit together here. It's going to help me with individual functions or chaining specific things together or solving specific problems. And I think it's really good for that. I mean, it takes
it's the new Stack Overflow.
Sure. Yeah. Which I think that's amazing. And I think there's a lot of programmers that are changing the way that they work, in that's your first point of call. And if it works, then why go further? If I'm not sure, then I'll double check. Then I'll check on Stack Overflow, maybe run some tests. So it's definitely changing the way developers write code on a more modular level. I wouldn't expect it, or at least I would expect it to be a while before it can make more architectural decisions where you have like trade-offs and more subjective, like I would need to give it context about the company and what our problems are, what our concerns are, and because there's no correct way to do this, and it has to take like a whole bunch of other factors into account. Was there any around this story, was there any like information around how he now uses it? Like, so this was an experiment and he was kind of pushing it to the limit. Did he say that he uses it regularly, or did he like give up on it, or
no, this was meant just to be, like you said, just to push it. How far can you push this envelope before it breaks? Like the whole point was this was not meant to be a replacement for anything, or it was never expecting to get working code even, much less something as close to functional as he got after just a few prompts. But I think the final conclusion he makes is this is not about to replace developers because of two problems he points out. The bot, it just spits out content from the articles used to train it. So if you're presenting a truly novel problem,
Yeah,
it's not gonna help.
sure.
And that's really the biggest hurdle facing this today. And I do think it's only a matter of time, though, before we do see this able to create a fully functioning to-do app with just a quick few sentences. We're 80% of the way there already.
Yeah.
You know, being very generous, but
No, but I feel like that's the theme with a lot of the workflows that I'm finding is this will get you 80% of the way. And I think that's fantastic. I suppose maybe in the future, or one way that we could like make this story more useful is like, okay, that was the limit. And, you know, that was kind of where it started to break down. But what can I use it for? What can I comfortably use it for? Right? Like what is the safe zone of like, what do programmers, how do they actually use it? What is business as usual now with code?
I was talking to a couple of friends of mine actually out last night. One is a programmer, one is a IT professor. So, you know, he doesn't do it professionally, but he knows what he's talking about. And they were both saying that where they have found use for it is quick and dirty debugging.
Okay.
This isn't working. Why isn't this working? Throw it in there. Oh, that colon should be a semicolon. Quick typo that's just hard to catch with the naked eye.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and I think that totally makes sense. But one thing that they both said that it struggles with is creating new code in any existing architecture. Like you can't funnel in within the confines of what I've already written. Do this. And that I think is probably the biggest hurdle to seeing this integrated in a lot of people's day-to-day workflow, because nothing exists in a vacuum. You can get a snippet that works great, but you might have to do so much modifying to it to get it to fit that you've done more than starting from nothing. Done more work than if you started from nothing.
Yeah. Super interesting.